I'm Susan Brooks Thistlethwaite. I'm President Emerita and Professor Emerita at Chicago Theological Seminary. And welcome to my video on fundraising in the time of COVID. Now look, here's the most important thing. These are tough times. Don't panic. It is possible to raise money in these difficult times. But if you convey anxiety, then others will feel anxiety and they will retreat. It's crucial that we support our churches and our organizations in this time to survive, but we have to resist panic. Calm down. It can be done. So I wanted to go on with what I've learned about fundraising over the many years I did it as president of Chicago Theological Seminary. Now you'll see here in this photo, that's me. That's Reverend David Pattee, who is a UCC pastor. He was my vice president for development when I was president. Tim Gill, who is a person who, through his brilliance, was able to earn a lot of money. He made the Gill Foundation, done tremendous work in philanthropy. He's even now helping with the crisis of COVID here in Colorado, where I live now. And there is next to him the Reverend Troy Perry. Troy founded the Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches, the MCC, and Troy was a trustee for us for many years. And from Troy and from Tim and from many others, I have learned the best fundraising is the love of neighbor. You learn from those who are generous. And it is a kind of reciprocal relationship that develops. We did role plays for the Board of Trustees to get them comfortable with asking money before we launched the capital campaign. And there was a role play where Troy and our wonderful board chair, Howard Morgan, who's also tremendous good at fundraising, they were the Ask team, and there was two trustees who were supposed to play a couple who had their own not-for-profit. And the idea there was that then they would talk about their not-for-profit, and it would make it possible for make it impossible for the Ask team to, launch into their Ask. And so they were doing a really good job of that. And Troy took out his wallet and offered them a donation. They were the Ask team. And what I learned from that is the incredible generosity of spirit that Troy brought to all relationships and to fundraising. In the debrief afterward, the trustee who was playing one of the not-for-profit people said he just wanted to take out his checkbook and write a check for Chicago Theological Seminary right then because it was so powerful. So, it's love of neighbor. We've got to change the way we think about fundraising. This is difficult. Yes, difficult times, and every organization is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all. But I will argue to you there are proven practices that produce results over time. Do your research. You need to make a spreadsheet of all your donors over a 10-year period. Now, I've heard some people say, oh no, the pastor should not be involved in that, and the pastor should not know who the donors are. But in this biblical and theological approach to fundraising, donor relations are central to the pastoral ministry. Central. Because the pastor's role is central in cultivating the love of God and neighbor. So, of course, the pastor has to be central to that. And I have found, as I said, that this method works very well because it is quite biblical and theological. So we say, when we do our research, we ask then, what is each person giving to? Who has fallen away? Who has been added? We do that analysis. We got to remember that all fundraising is personal. Raising money comes from cultivating personal relationships. It's trust building. We give because we care about advancing the mission. That's why I give to organizations. You've got to know what the mission is. You cannot be too clear about what your church stands for and what you all as a congregation want to accomplish. How can you get people to join you in that mission? Very good example of this is I was on the board of a not-for-profit in Washington, D.C., and we were meeting, and I got to talking with someone who, in addition to being on that board, was helping to run what was then called America's Second Harvest. And this is an organization that was founded to get food donated from companies that had not sold all their food, and then they fed people with that. It was a second harvest. But they had a consultant. The consultant said, it is not clear what you do. What does a second harvest mean to the donor? And so they suggested they become Feeding America. And Feeding America grew exponentially from that because, this is a charity I give to, I am feeding Americans when I give to this charity. Could not be clearer. And Feeding America has grown tremendously since that time. The donor joins the mission, becomes connected to it. That's what happens. Now, what's different about raising money in a pandemic? Now, some in your congregation may feel this is not a good time to ask for money as there's so much suffering and loss. Well, you will need to be exceptionally clear about how the ministry and the mission of this church is part of how, even though we are staying physically apart much of the time, we need to be more vitally connected to one another than ever. Don't be defensive about the need to support your work is doing in this difficult time. Don't be defensive about your need to have a salary. How does the ministry and mission of this church happen if there's not a staff to be able to support people who belong to the church? What is your church doing among members and for the community? Be the church. We want to touch their stomachs, says Reverend Watkins of a ministry that 3 churches are participating in Hartford, Connecticut. The church has to be beyond the 4 walls. And are we not learning that in this pandemic? We can't go into the 4 walls. So we have to be the church and not rely on the walls to tell us who we are. Online worship is a great opportunity for outreach and growth. 2,700 people joined an online worship in a UCC Colorado church that normally has about 150 to 200. You get, maybe they're the only game in town, I would imagine, in terms of online worship. Add the names and email addresses of those who join your online worship. Send them an immediate electronic thank you for attending. Include a moment of asking for support for this ministry in every online service, just naturally as part of it, just as a stewardship moment every time. Ask in worship and make online giving to the church easy. If you don't have a little give button at the top of your church website, immediately upon finishing this video, go set that up. You need to be able to have credit card or PayPal donations and make it easy for people. Yes, they can mail a check, but that is just a couple more steps. And a give button, I think, is really crucial, especially in these times. You've got your database now, who've given to the church, given in the past, and those who pledge and give regularly. Thank them if you're not doing that on a regular basis. A leadership team can help you divide up this work. Identify those who are regular members but who are not giving. And construct an electronic ask. Focus on the work of sustaining the church and expanding the ministry and mission. Be specific. You need to not just talk in generalities. Make sure you focus on the community connections that are being sustained and expanded in this time. Make it about the connection giver to the community. Connection. It's all about. connections, love of neighbor. Growth. This can be a time to grow. Consider a targeted campaign for the ministry and mission of your church in this time. Focus especially on expanding the community mission and sustaining ministry. Purchase PPE for the local hospital or clinic if they lack it. Feed families. Give to local domestic violence and shelters programs. Domestic violence has risen dramatically as people have been forced to stay in their homes. The UCC purchasing medical debt is perfect. This is not something, when I go explain to people about UCC and why I love the UCC so much, I often use the buying up medical debt as an example because it's just so biblical. Helping people get out of debt. And once you explain that to people and they go, wow, your church does that, they realize, you don't even have to explain it, that we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We are who we claim to be. And that's who you've got to be that as your church, and you've got to help people join that. Make sure you say in this ask, this amount of the money will go to direct giving, this is what we'll spend on the PPE, and this is what will go to support the church ministry. Be truthful. Always be truthful. That's part of trust. The direct ask. Now, face-to-face, not possible right now. I don't believe in surprising people with cold calls, either like to invite them to lunch and then drop an ask on them, or in this time, cold call them on the phone. Don't do that. Send an email requesting a time to talk on the phone, whether you think you can participate in this campaign too. If yes, set up a time to talk and write out a script. That's very important. The reason is that someone might accept your offer of a call because they want to vent. There's so much frustration and anger floating around, just free-floating, and it wants to vent. I know I'm feeling frustration and anger myself. You've got to be sympathetic for that, but you got to stick to your script. You'll get back, well, the reason I don't give or I stopped giving is because you preach, all that liberal stuff. And you say, I appreciate the feedback, but what I wanted to talk to you about, don't stop. Just go right into your ask. Once you get into a back and forth about what you preach or why you preach, you're lost. It's gone. You just might as well say very, very cordially and sweetly, nice talking to you. You've got to just get it out there. Now, odds are, if somebody accepted this call to vent, they're not that interested in giving. But at least you will have gotten it out there. And then thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You must say thank you frequently and say it in a personal way. Handwritten cards are best. And for heaven's sake, don't make the thank you part of another ask. That's not a nice thank you. I really dislike that when somebody sends me a form letter and says, oh, thank you for giving to XYZ, and we'd appreciate it if you'd give more right now. That's not a thank you. Make it personal. Show you know the person. We at Trustee, tremendous supporter of the seminary, and he wrote a big check for a special project, and I looked at the check and I was, oh my goodness. So I wrote him a personal note, and it said, wow, this is the exact wording, wow, his name, that was a boatload of money. Thank you so much, Susan. Now he's the kind of person I knew would like that. And he brought the card to a trustees meeting and read it aloud and said, I knew that my gift was appreciated because Susan wrote me this. Another donor wrote me a note saying, gee, your thank you note arrived in the mail before the check cleared the bank. You got to be quick. Get the thank yous right out there, right away. Don't wait till you got a whole pile and you have an afternoon where you have nothing else to do. Right away, get the thank yous out. Acknowledge that giving in these times is a sacrifice. Celebrate at the year end. Thank you for all of you who made this ministry and mission possible. Now, it may have to be a big Zoom call with balloons and confetti, but you must make a fuss, because for people to give in this time is really something to celebrate. Now, I will say that my approach now to the biblical and theological fundraising is very much based on the idea of love one another. The village of Le Chambon in France hid hundreds of Jews from the Nazis. Love one another in French is Aimez-vous les autres, over the door. And there's a film about what they did called The Conspiracy of Goodness. And I taught about this for many years in my Good and Evil class. So much so that I finally got on a plane and I went to Le Chambon and I spent time there. To me, love one another is the heart of the church. And if we follow these words and we practice this, and we as church leaders do like André Trocmé did, the pastor of Le Chambon, encourage people to love one another, I believe we will be very successful, even in the most difficult times, in getting support for the church, because the church will be acting like the church. Thank you all for listening. I hope you found the video helpful.